Awesome. Welcome, everybody. We are going to hold for a quick moment. I see that some folks are joining us. For those of you who are watching this as a replay on YouTube, hello. Happy Parent Webinar Day. Webinar Wednesdays. I was thinking about that today. Webinar Wednesdays. And so there's going to be some interaction in this. So even if you're watching the replay, I'm going to ask that when we have questions, and of course, all of this is if you feel comfortable, we're going to ask that you type in your answers into the chat. Or, like I said, if you're watching the replay, to type it in under the comments. Well, I'm Eve Boyd. I am the community ambassador for Guiding Bright Minds. So I work alongside the amazing Tiffany Feingold's. I have been with Guiding Bright Minds for about 2 years. So if you watch our webinars, you've probably seen me a few times. Maybe this is your first time meeting me. So hello, I am not a stranger. And so today I'm really excited about our topic because our free parent webinar today that we're putting on is about perfectionism and breaking free from that. So really breaking free from the cult of perfect for both you yourself as an individual as well as your children. And so I know as a caretaker and as just a human of this earth that I have been a part of the cult of perfection. I know Tiffany was very passionate about this topic as well. So I'm excited. So our co-host today is Allison Gleitman. She is a therapist. She's the owner of Heart First Therapy. You have several different acronyms after your name. So that's how I know she's an MA, LPC, LCC. And so, yeah, so thank you so much for being here with us today, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me, Eve. I'm really excited to present.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and jump into it unless there's anything else that you need to say first.
No, so a couple house cleaning items. That always sounds so strange, right? When we're on a webinar, house cleaning. So a couple first things, like we said at the start of this, go ahead and put your comments down below. Also, with regards to if you have questions, you can save those. You can ask them as we go. So if you do have anything that pops in, you can put them in the comments. But we're going to save till the end to answer them. So for some reason you have to hop off early, and you didn't get your question answered yet, then check back on the replay. Sound good, everybody? Awesome. All right, Allison. Well, that's all. Yes. So welcome, and we are excited to hear about breaking free of the cult of perfectionism.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share. Hopefully, everybody can see now. So please tell me if I have it incorrect. But yes, I'm Allison. I'm a therapist and I am the owner of my own private practice. I'm going to ask if everybody's comfortable who's here. If you want to put anything in the chat about your child or your children's ages, including the ages you work with, if you're a professional, your reason for attending, and if you have any preliminary questions that I should know about so that I can answer those either throughout the course of the presentation or at the end. As you're doing that, I am a therapist. I specialize in working with gifted, multi-exceptional neurodivergent folks, ages 10 and up. That includes highly sensitive people. I'm a former teacher. I'm a former school counselor. I'm a former gifted coordinator and point of contact. I'm the parent of two 2E kids myself, and I'm a 2E person, ADHD. You'll probably notice it at some point if you're around me very often. And then I would acknowledge myself as a recovering perfectionist because I think it is important to name when we've had our own challenges in these areas. So I want to start by talking a little bit about what is perfectionism and where it comes from. And so this is a definition that I think is helpful to look at, that perfectionism is striving for flawlessness and setting exceedingly high standards of performance, accompanied by tendencies for overly critical evaluations of one's behavior. Usually when we're talking about perfectionism, we're not looking at it as a positive thing, right? We're looking at it as in problematic ways. That's not the only way it exists. It can be positive. We want surgeons, for example, who are perfectionists. Like we don't want the pilot of our aircraft to be like, I don't know, it bounced a couple times as I set it down, but that seemed fine. We want people who are doing their very best in those areas where it's about safety. And so the positive side of perfectionist is you're feeling pride. It feels values aligned. You're feeling a sense of conscientiousness, and it can support productivity and creativity. However, the negative side is where a lot of us tend to go. And that's where it's leading to stress. It leads to anxiety. It can lead to depression. Eating disorders are highly correlated with perfectionist behaviors and perfectionist attitudes, substance use concerns as well, because the stress of dealing with perfectionism often leads people to want to escape that in some kind of way. It can cause problems in relationships. Which we'll get to a little bit more in a little bit. It takes a lot of time to be a perfectionist, and it means you don't necessarily have the time to do other things that might also matter to you. It really impacts self-esteem and it can cause shame and guilt. And so those are the parts of perfectionism that we want to be really aware of and really want to try to avoid as much as possible. So when we're thinking about perfectionism and the origins of it, sometimes it comes from the potential, that word potential. So a lot of us have heard that word potential over and over again throughout our lives. You have so much potential. And I think especially those of us who are in that neurodivergent world in some kind of way, you have so much potential if you could only do this thing. You have so much potential if you can only change in this one way. And so it leads us to think like we have these amazing characteristics, which is true, but that nobody sees them because of these other facts, which is not true. But we're focusing on this part where we're not seeing these things, where nobody's seeing our potential. And so we want to make our potential be seen. We want to live up to our potential because we have this opportunity. And so that can lead to that negative perfectionism. It also comes from a fixed mindset, and specifically the language of fixed mindsets. And that can be both internal and external. Like, you are so smart. You are so beautiful. You are so kind. You are so sweet. When we have this fixed mindset language, it leads us to think this is the way we have to be. We have to always be this thing. We have to always be smart. We all have to always be athletic. We have to always be uh, beautiful. We have to always be this kind of way. And if we're not this kind of way, then we're not anything. We're not worth anything. And so that language that we hear from others and that we hear from ourselves can be really damaging and cause some of that perfectionism. It also comes from the focus on achievement from those around us. And that can be family expectations around achievement. It can be school expectations around achievement. It can be a peer focus on achievement. It can be done from a positive way. Again, originally, it can be somebody saying, like, hey, I did really well on this test. How did you do? And so it can feel like it's a positive thing. Somebody might be expressing pride in their own behavior. But if we're looking at it and thinking, oh, I didn't do quite as well on that test, then it can end up feeling super negative and super painful. And we start to feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. I have to do better. Um, I think a lot of the systems we live in are really heavily focused on achievement generally and on perfection generally. And that really heavily includes the media. And so that's both social media and other media because we are surrounded by that all the time. And so when we're seeing the images that are put out on media of any sort, there's there are some people who will put out things where they're showing like the imperfections, where they're showing the Instagram perfect image of their house, and then they turn and show the other side of it where they shoved everything real fast so that they can do the Instagram perfect image, right? Like, so there are people who are doing that, but a whole lot more of it is just that Instagram perfect image. Um, Same thing with magazines, same thing with any kind of media we're watching. Rarely are we seeing people make mistakes. Or if they do make a mistake, it's an easy one to fix because you have to fit it in that 23 or 54-minute time slot for a show, whatever it is. But there's just a lot of focus on perfection in all these areas. And so it builds up in us. It gets stuck in us and it builds up and it just continues to go. And again, from a neurodivergence lens, we tend to have more sensitive nervous systems. And so these things that hit us, they hit us hard and they go deep and it feels really stuck in there and it can take some more work and more time to get out. Whereas somebody with maybe a slightly less sensitive nervous system, it might be less of a big deal. And so it can be really impactful and for those of us who are in that world. Um, there are 5 types of perfectionism that I want to talk about that I think can be helpful to think about. And these are specifically from a book called Letting Go of Perfect. So if this is a topic that you're really interested in, that you see a lot of struggles with yourself or with your children in, this book can be really helpful in thinking about how to overcome perfectionism, and to think about the different types of perfectionism because it's
What
not
is the
all
name again?
it's called letting go of perfect.
Letting
And
go.
the authors are Jill Adelson and Hope Wilson. So it's right here.
Look
Sure.
at you. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Hope Wilson.
Yeah.
And we do have a couple responses just really
Oh,
quick.
great.
Let you
Okay.
know, we do have a parent of a 1-year-old, or one
Hmm.
child, a 10-year-old. We
Hmm.
have elementary, first through fifth,
Great.
and then an adult, caregiver of an adult. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, so it looks like we have lots of different age groups with us today.
Great. Yeah. Okay. A lot of this will be really relevant then. And I think, especially for the younger side, it's really helpful to think about this now so that it doesn't become internalized too strongly. Because I think, especially as kids get older, um, thinking about that side of it where I mentioned the peer focus and achievement, especially as they get older and they're getting into that like middle school, high school age and college is on the horizon and there is so much focus on that, perfectionism becomes a really big factor. So working on this now when they're young is such a smart choice and such a I don't know quite the word I want is it's such a productive choice and helpful choice for your family. Such a powerful choice. So
That's awesome.
okay, so the first type of perfectionism is the achiever. And in the book, it's talking specifically about the academic achiever, but it doesn't have to be just academics. It is somebody who has these unrealistically high goals for success, and that can be in academics, but it can be in sports, it can be in artistic endeavors, it can be in leadership of some sort. The people who see themselves as being able to lead others and wanting to do it in a wonderful way. For those of us who are adults, this is showing up in our jobs frequently. It can show up in our caregiving frequently. I think a lot of us want to be the best parent we can be, the best caregiver we can be, and we have these goals for success because these are things that matter to us. They matter to us immensely, and so of course we want to do a great job, and that's very normal. And at the same time, it can end up becoming really problematic. Another type is what the book calls the aggravated accuracy assessor. I find it more helpful to think about that as the constant restarter. And so that's the sense of if it's not right, don't keep going, start again. Um, this is the person who they get through the first line on a story and they tear it out and throw it away, or they delete it off the screen and start again because it's not quite right. And so it's that fear that if it's not perfect, it's not worth going. Like it's not worth keeping on going. You should just give up at that point and continue on and forget about anything you've done before. You can't continue on. You need to forget about where you are. You need to start again because you have to get it right. If they're working on math homework and the first problem isn't perfectly easy to solve, they might quit and not want to keep going. They need to, it's about like restarting every single time so that you get through to the end result, or so that you never get through to the end result. You're always restarting, you're always trying to make it be perfect, and it's never going to be. There's also the risk evader. These are the folks who don't even try. If it's not going to go the way you want, why bother? Like, don't go for it. Um, I think about like Bart Simpson with this one sometimes. The like, who cares if I can't like do it really well? Whereas Lisa would be that first one, right? Like Lisa Simpson would be that one who's looking for like the accuracy. Um, but this is the like, if it can't be perfect, why even try? Why even step into it in the first place? Next, they call the controlling image manager. And so this is the person who's like, I could have if I wanted to. I could have won that contest if I had tried. I would have come in first place if I had entered it. If I had tried out for the soccer team, I would be the star player on it. But it's the fear of not being number one. And so it leads them to not even try at all. So it leads them to not go for it. As adults, this can be getting stuck in a job that you don't really like, you don't really feel is the right fit for you because there's a fear that you won't get the next thing that you might try for. And so better to stick with the thing you have than to try for something that you want and not get it, because the pain of that can be so immense. And again, that's that sensitive nervous system, right? So this I kind of think of, and this is maybe dating me. This is definitely dating me, but The Breakfast Club, like John Bender from The Breakfast Club, like the too cool for school world, right? Like I don't care. Like I could have done it if I wanted to. Um, I thought that's what comes to mind for me. And then there's the procrastinating perfectionist. So these are the people who can visualize what perfect will be, but they're afraid they can't achieve it. And so they don't even start. They can see what it's going to look like, they have it in their head. For kids, this is a hard place to be because, of course, they're not going to achieve like what perfect is going to be because they're children. It's not supposed to be perfect yet, right? Like it's about the process, but that's not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about that end result. And so this is that ability to visualize what perfect should be, to visualize this amazing thing, but not be able to get there. Procrastination isn't always about perfectionism. Sometimes it is about struggles with breaking down. Well, this is still struggles with perfectionism, but like sometimes it's about like task initiation. It struggles with task initiation and being able to get started on something, which can be different. Um, but often the procrastination from that perfectionist side is like just not getting started because like how are you going to get to that end result? Um, so there's three styles of perfectionism that we're going to talk about next. So the first style is self-oriented. And self-oriented is the type that I think most of us probably think about when we think about perfectionism, is where we're putting pressure on ourselves to be the very best. And again, sometimes we want that. Like there are areas in which we want to put some pressure on ourselves to do a great job, to do really well, and to do it at an exceptionally high level. So again, like if you're a concert pianist, that's something where maybe you want to put that pressure on yourself in that area for a particular piece. It's not necessarily something where you're going to want to put that pressure on yourself for every single thing. I think as parents or caregivers, we often put that pressure on ourselves to be the perfect mother, the perfect parent, the perfect caregiver. And that is where it can often be less adaptive because that's not possible. That's not what it means to be human. Being human is inherently imperfect, but we want to be perfect because we see that the people we love deserve it. So we have this internal, like self-oriented perfectionist behaviors, and it can end up being pretty painful and pretty overwhelming. There's also other oriented. So this is where we're putting pressure on others to be perfect. And sometimes as parents, we can go this direction too, or as caregivers, we can go this direction too. Same thing with teachers, because we see the potential that somebody has. Again, there's that word, right? Potential. We see that and we know that they can do this amazing job. We know that they can be wonderful. We want everybody to see that this wonderful thing about them. And so it can come from this place of love, but it doesn't always feel this way. It can end up feeling like a lot of pressure for somebody who's receiving it. Kids can do this as well. Kids can have this other oriented perfectionist style as well, where it's something that's really easy for them. They don't see necessarily, it's a little differently. I think for kids, it comes up a little differently. So for something that's really easy for a kid, they expect everybody else to have it be just as easy for them. And so they'll point out spelling mistakes or they'll point out math mistakes. And for the person who's receiving that, it can feel really critical as well. It's not meant as critical. It's meant as a like it's often meant as a I'm helping you get better. I'm helping you to do this thing. Like or again from a neurodivergence lens, sometimes our brains our words go a little faster than our brains go. And we might not even have the take that time to process and think that because we can't, that maybe this other person doesn't want this. It just comes out, right? It's that impulsivity that just slips right out. Um, and so it can feel really frustrating for the person who's receiving it. Then there's the socially prescribed perfectionism. And these are the ones who feel like her feeling the pressure, that external pressure on them. So the other oriented and socially prescribed can be really heavily linked because other oriented can be aimed at somebody, and that person who's getting that other oriented feels socially prescribed. With the socially prescribed, I think a lot about like Encanto. And for example, the sisters in Encanto, Luisa and Isabella, where their expectation was like Isabella was supposed to be perfect and make these beautiful, wonderful things all the time. And that is what she was supposed to be. That was the pressure put on her from everybody else. Luisa had to carry the weight for everybody. That was the expectation that she could carry the weight for everybody. And so it's trying the best to please others, trying the best to live up to their standards. And it's impossible. The other oriented, you might think of maybe Mary Poppins, like again, is coming from a place of love that she's wanting everybody to be very positive, but it can go too far. And that's where it can end up being really painful. I think for the self-oriented, you might think of Glinda from Wicked, where she has a lot of pressure on herself to be the very best. And at times it is adaptive and at times it is not. And then realistically, why limit ourselves to just one? Often, if we're in this world of perfectionism, we are experiencing all three. If we're hard on ourselves, we are often hard on other people, and we're often feeling the pressure from someone else too. Um, my daughter was part of the play Mean Girls Junior this year, and it really reminded me, Regina George, like that character, right? Like she's the mean girl in that movie where the pressure is on her from others. She puts it on herself and she is putting that pressure on others. And so that Venn diagram, that overlap in the center, a lot of us fall into that overlap right in the center, which is can be a pretty dark place to be. So if we know it's bad, if we know it's damaging, we know it's hurting us, we know it's hurting the people we care about, then why don't we just stop? Why do we keep doing this to ourselves? Well, that's really hard, right? This is a habit for a lot of us. It comes from childhood. We've had these neural pathways created in our heads where over and over we've heard about potential. Over and over we've been told, like, just try a little harder and you can do it. Over and over we've been told that you have to succeed at the very highest levels. And so when we have that internalized in us, those are habits that are really tough to break. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of intentionality, and it can be pretty overwhelming. We also are often getting praised for our perfectionism, realistically. Like if we have that self-oriented perfectionism and we achieve super well as a child on tests, like if we test really well, we're getting praised for that. We're getting told like what a great job we did. We're getting recognized for these things. Um, and that can be really appealing to feel that success. That feels really warm and supportive when we're getting that love and that care for doing well. And so sometimes we stop realizing that we can get it in other ways because we're getting it in this way. But we all want to be praised. We all want to feel like we're doing the right thing. We all want to be told that we're doing great. We all want to be looked up to. We want to get the classroom awards and the end of school year awards. We want to be recognized with bonuses at our work. We all want these things. Um, that's part of what we want. And so it makes sense. Um, it can also come from being unclear on our values. So again, I think a lot of this comes from the systems we exist in. And so if our systems, uh, if the values of the systems don't align with our own values, but we're not taking the time to think about what our values actually are, it's really easy to get stuck in that system thing, right? Like, so it's really easy to get stuck in, um, like for example, the schools that do perfect attendance awards might not align with your values around taking care of yourself and being well and being healthy. But if we're not thinking about that we have these values around self-care and around being healthy and around taking care of ourselves, and we're just striving to meet these expectations of others, these values that don't align with our own, but we're not even aware of it, then we get really stuck in that. It's really easy to fall into that area. Um, I think another thing that perfectionism does for us, it gives us the illusion of control or safety in a really complicated world. We live in a really tough world. I don't think there's anybody right now who's like, man, things are like sailing smooth. Everybody's loving it. Life is great. Whatever your perspective on a lot of different factors, I think most of us are aware. I think all of us are aware that there's things that are really hard for a lot of people. And so perfectionism is a way where we feel like we can control something when a lot of things feel really out of control. Um, this can be true for us as adults. This can also be true for kids. Kids have a lot of things that are out of their control. They have a lot of things where they don't get to make decisions. And so being perfect at their grades, being perfect at their free throw, being perfect at the poetry they're writing for a poetry contest is a way to have some control. Or alternatively, to choose not to be perfect, to choose not to engage at all, again, is a way of controlling things when we don't always feel like we have a ton of control. Um, I think another thing for those of us as parents, again, and I think I spoke about this a little bit earlier, is that our children are amazing. Of course they are. Of course our children are amazing. We want them to see that. We want others to see that. We want our kids to know how much we value them. We want our kids to know how grateful we are for them and how wonderful they are and all these phenomenal things about them. And sometimes that leads us, because of these habits, because of praise, because of our fear around in these uncertain worlds, to pressure them in certain directions. And so again, like we want everybody to get to see and we want everybody to recognize how amazing our children are. And in the end, it's not always helpful. And then again, I think part of it with perfectionism is sometimes it is adaptive. Sometimes it is a positive thing that leads to positive things for us. And so it can be complicated to tease out when is it adaptive and when is it not. And so if we're thinking about it as like this perfect way of being, we have to really take some time to pay attention to those downsides. We have to really take the time to think about, well, what are we experiencing as well? If we are so focused on being perfect that at the end of the day, we're using substances in a way that's excessive and unhealthy, then it's not adaptive, right? Like if it's a thing where we can't sleep at night because we're so worried about if a child can't sleep because they're so worried about their test, if as adults we can't sleep because we're so worried about our performance reviews, it's not healthy. These are not adaptive ways of being. And so it's really important to figure out when it's adaptive and when it's not, and what do we do about that? So then what do we do? Because if it's all these reasons why it's like so easy to stick with being perfectionist, then it can feel really hard to figure out what to do next. And so that's what I'm going to talk about is some ways we can work on some of these things for ourselves and for our children. So the first thing I think for kids is teach them about positive and negative perfectionism. Talk about the fact that sometimes perfect can be worth striving for if it aligns with your values, if it aligns with your interests, and if it is reachable. I think it's really important to talk about the systems that are perfect pushing negative perfectionism that don't align with values. I think it's really important to point out in media the perfectionist things, especially around appearance that come up in like all the movies. I think it's really important to have those conversations with kids and talk about this. It's important to talk about it in their schools if they are overly focused on just grades and not on growth. I think it's important to talk about those things and where it does or does not align with your own values and your family's values. But teaching kids about the differences between adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism is really helpful so they can start to reflect for themselves and self-assess like, hey, is this something that I want to be as good as I can be at this, or is this something where it's starting to make me feel really stressed out and I need to figure out how to do it differently? Okay. Another thing that I think is important to do is to explore values. And so that can be, there's tons of lists of values out there. The image I have on here is a card deck that I use a lot, mainly because I like the art on it and I think it's pretty. But there's online versions of it. You can find lists of values that you can do. So like there's online source, or you can also look at activities. You can do it in a more, concrete way, I think, with kids, where you're looking at like the things they're involved in and the parts of their life and determine like what's important to them and what's not. So to spend the time thinking about like what's really important to them. So like maybe if they're that achiever and they're the academic achiever and they want to have straight A's and everything, does that matter to them? Do they really care? Or is it okay for them like to get a B plus in English because it's not their favorite subject? They're getting through, they're doing fine. And really where they want to put their time into is all their STEM classes because that's the thing that matters to them. Um, is it looking at activities and they're doing um, soccer and piano and gymnastics, and they decide that like they like piano, but they just kind of want to mess around on the piano, and that's fine for them. But really, where they want to put all their time in is going to be gymnastics. Like I think it's determining what matters to them, and I think as part of that, it's discussing the similarities and differences between what's important to you and what's important to them, and that it's okay for them to be different. So if you are somebody who is super strong in that, if you're a writer, if you're strong in that English world and it's hard for you to see your child going for that B plus grade or the B minus grade or the C plus grade, um, then naming that it's okay for them to be different. It's okay for them to be strong in STEM, and it's okay for them to focus on the things that actually matter to them and not all the other things as well. A big part of it is that growth piece, right? So that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So really focusing on improvement and learning. Um, when you're looking at schoolwork, talking about what they learned instead of what their grade was. So that might be if they're coming home with a test, you're not even looking at the score, you're pulling out a question that looks complicated and asking them to talk through what their thinking was like. If it's a piece of writing, it's not looking again at like the places where they lost points on the rubric. It's asking them to talk about what they were proudest of or what the standards were that they really feel that they achieved on this, that they think that they feel really good about. Again, it's really looking at that growth, thinking about like where they started versus where they ended. If there's a pre-test, post-test option to compare both of those, and again, focus on the growth, not on the scores, but on all the things they learned learned in that process. If we're talking sports, it's talking about how they played with specifics about like, man, I really noticed like you were really focused on passing to your teammates and what a positive thing that was for everybody. Or I could really see your um that how I'm not an aggressive person, but I know sports are supposed to be aggressive. How aggressive you were in the game, and that really was like that. You really pushed yourself to be that way, rather than like you scored 2 goals or you shot 3 points. Um, Again, if it's something artistic, what are they proud of instead of like the mistakes they made? Like really focusing on like this big picture. So many things are great instead of the things that are not as strong. And thinking about what their process was to get through the challenge instead of just the end result. Uh, I think that's a super important thing to do. These are great things to model. All of these things are really important things to be able to model for your children as well. So if you made a dinner and you burned the bread that's supposed to go with it slightly, yeah, I mean you could acknowledge that you burned the bread, but you're also going to spend the time talking about all the positives and all the things that went really well. Our brains have a negativity bias. I should have put a slide in this about this, but our brains have a negativity bias. We are it's a survival thing, right? Like our brains are aligned towards the negative because that's how we survive. If we walk up to a river, we don't have a lot of time from a survival lens to think about how beautiful that river is and look at it like shining in the sun and splashing so lovely, beautifully on the bank. We need to know if that river has crocodiles because that's how we survive. And so our brains have a negativity bias to get through life. That's really important for us, and that's great. Except that to thrive, we want to go beyond survival. So we want to go beyond the negative into the thriving of the positive. And so focusing on that improvement and learning is super important. It's also really helpful to develop and prioritize goals. And so to list out a child's tasks or goals, if you're doing goals, differentiate between short, medium, and long term. They're not necessarily going to learn how to play a symphony immediately, but they can do it gradually over time and talk about that. From a neurodivergence lens, right? Like all of the executive functioning that goes into these things is so hard. And so to take the time to really reflect on and plan out like where things are short-term goals, where they're medium-term goals, and where they're long-term goals, as well as rank them according to importance to the individual. And so not everything can be a 10 of importance. So again, if we're looking at like classes, like maybe it's a week where they have a whole lot going on and they determine that their classes are going to be more important to them than making their karate practice, because the class, like getting through their history day project is going to be a 10 to them, and it's a lot of work and they've really got to get through it. And then karate practice that week is only a 3 for them. And so that's going to be the thing that's going to drop by the wayside because there's just not time to do everything. I would include on this self-care things. I would include self-care around, like, I would include sleep and that sleep needs to be important. I would include that downtime is important. These are things that also matter for our health. And so thinking about these as like, these are also important for us. And we also need to include these things also helps us to prioritize like, okay, sleep is going to be a 10 of importance. And so I can't do all these other things as well because I do actually have to sleep. This is good for us as adults too, because sometimes we're good at taking that time away and not sleeping. Um, I think from the procrastination lens, the people who get overwhelmed by not even knowing where to start and not knowing like what the starting point could be. Big tasks need to be small pieces. So if you can help them break it down, include time in a time frame of revision, and then check in periodically with them on progress. Eventually, the goal is for them to do this themselves. But if from a neurodivergence lens, some places we're advanced, some places we have some delays, then it's going to take us some time to get through some of this executive functioning stuff and get to that point where we can do that more independently or with less support. Doing that to help them get started and get to the point where they can complete something rather than just being like, I can see the beautiful end result, but I don't know how to get from A to Z. Helping them break down all those pieces in between is super important. Okay. Um, Another thing that I highly recommend is increasing independence and taking risks. And so doing things independently in and of itself is going to help with help reduce some anxiety. It won't inherently help with perfectionism. You have to discuss the process afterwards, not just the result. So again, we're going to be talking about it from a growth mindset perspective and looking at the process and them doing something. But if it's something where they want to do things independently, if they want to be able to go to the local pizza place with a friend and get pizza for lunch, then it's not just about the result of getting that done. It's also about the process along the way of all the things that went into it, but focusing on the fact that they were able to do these things independently and get through it. Um, Destination Imagination is a really wonderful organization where it's all about kids doing everything independently. The teams have team managers, but they're kind of there to like keep everybody safe. There's like little teaching moments at times, but the kids get to make all the decisions. And so it's a way to take risks in a fun way. And you have to make decisions to get through things. You have to make decisions about solving your challenge so that you can get to the other side of it. So anytime you can increase a child's independence and with something they want to do, not like independence with the stuff that we would like them to be independent at, the things that are maybe kind of frustrating for us as parents or caregivers, that we would really like them to be independent with, like, for example, perhaps cleaning their room or doing their laundry. Not a lot of kids are like excited about getting to that. Some of them are, but it's choosing the things they want to be independent on themselves so that they want to put the work into figuring out like what's the process to get it done. How do they get there? If it's something they really care about and really want to have and really want to achieve, doing it that way can be really helpful. Another way to do that is to have everyone in the family choose different activities and everyone tries them. And the focus is on trying. The focus is not on how well it goes. And so it can't just be activities um, that somebody's really good at and somebody's really not. If you have one child who is the more creative type and one child who is the more athletic type, making sure the different activities you all are choosing meet their strengths in different ways and align with different children's strengths in different ways so that they have the opportunity to do something they're good at, as well as the inherent, like something that comes more easily for them, right? As well as something that comes a little less easily for them, and that the purpose is to try it, to take risks, to focus on fun, to focus on growth, and to be able to have those conversations. This is a great opportunity to model things. Like if you are somebody who, I hate video games. I will say that. I hate playing video games. I am not very good at them. I don't find them very fun. There's a couple I don't mind. But I will try to play a video game if one of my children asks me to, because A, it's a good opportunity for me to hang out with them, and B, it's a good opportunity for me to model being bad at something and doing it anyway. Um, Mario Kart, I often come in dead last. That's okay. Sometimes I make it up to like ninth place. That's exciting, because I feel, like I've had fun with the game. But really, and I can talk about the fact that like, oh, this time I paid more attention to where the shortcut was, and I can take that shortcut, and so then I can get to the next part more productively, so that I'm like focused on again the process. But anytime you can focus on the process, not the result, it's really important to do and focus on and modeling that for the kids. Um, and then this is going to be, I think, the number one thing that I would recommend from perfectionism. So, the number one thing to do for working with perfectionism is teaching about self-compassion and then intentionally practicing it regularly. So, self-compassion, this is from Kristen Neff's work. There's three elements of self-compassion. The first one is being mindful of what you feel. So, when you're struggling with something, notice that. Notice that you made a mistake in some kind of way from like a perfectionist lens, that you didn't get the grade you wanted, or that you didn't finish the work project in the time you wanted to finish it in. Notice the discomfort. Notice whatever you're feeling. Name the emotion if you can, but notice that discomfort and be aware of it. Notice where it's showing up in your body, and be aware of it. Next, self-kindness. Speaking to yourself the way you would speak to somebody else. None of us would ever speak to somebody who is struggling the way we speak to ourselves. Most kids are really good at being really hard on themselves, and most adults are also really good at being really hard on themselves. As adults, we just tend to be better at keeping it inside our heads. Kids often say a little bit more of it out loud. But speaking to ourselves like in a kind way that feels true, and specifically doing it in the second person, is really helpful. So instead of like, if I was speaking to myself, instead of saying, it's okay that I screwed up, I can do better next time, I can actually speak to myself in the second person and say, like, it's Allison, it is okay that you snapped at your son. You can apologize. You can do better next time. You can work on having some, taking some breaths in it in the future and doing a better job of doing that. And then the third part, and this is really important, is to connect common humanity. And so that I can add in, it's part of being human. It's part of being a parent to get frustrated and to behave in ways that is not our favorite way of being. You can do better next time. It's part of being a person. But working on these three parts and working on these three elements of self-compassion is super important for for reducing that perfectionism and letting ourselves be okay with making mistakes and be okay with, again, being a person. And then I think linked to that, teach them about the concept of wabi sabi. Our imperfections make us individuals. Our imperfections show our history. They show where we've come from. They show our past, scars or stories, right? I think there's an AJR song that the title is probably not this, but one of the lines is 100 bad days makes 100 good stories. Um, and so looking at it from that way, looking at like that mistakes can show our beauty, mistakes can show our individualism, mistakes can be interesting to talk about with other people's. They're connecting. It's a way to be vulnerable with others and talk about our own issues. And sometimes we can connect that way. Talking about these concepts with kids that this is important and real is a real thing to do. And so again, modeling all of this, modeling self-compassion, modeling talking about things that are imperfect in your life and that that's okay, that it feels okay to have this be imperfect, modeling that your house is not always going to be Instagram clean, unless it is. If that like is something that is you and that really matters to you, and then that's okay. But that there's going to be other times when something matters more. Like maybe it's a really busy week with kids' activities and family stuff, and maybe there's holidays, and so that might be the week where there's a pile of paper somewhere or some dog fur on the floor, and pointing that out and being like, right now, I chose that something else was more important to me, and because that's part of my life. So, those are some of my recommendations for working on perfectionism. And now I would love to take any questions. I'm going to try to look at the chat and see if I understand how to do that.
No worries. No worries at all. That was awesome, Allison. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. I can't actually click on the chat. I don't know why.
No,
So
no
I think
worries.
it's a me thing. So is there
Absolutely.
anything in there?
Yes.
Are there any questions that I would be
Yes,
helpful
I
for
got
me
a
to answer?
couple. And somebody just said, fantastic session. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
So negative bias. It looks like somebody's asking, is that why my child is so negative, or is this them in survival?
I mean, it could be both, right? Like, so again, if your child tends towards perfectionism, then they're really aware of those imperfections, and it can come from all these places, right? It can come from all these systems and all these things. But again, but our brains do have this negative bias, and that negative bias happens really fast. Because again, if you're at that river, you have a split second to notice the crocodiles, whereas it can take you a lot longer to think about like the pretty branches across it blowing in the breeze. So we could really quickly go to that negative bias. So we have to be really intentional about focusing on the positive in these times, and teaching about that negative bias. That again, that's survival. That's how we survive. But we don't want to just survive. We want to thrive. So we have to focus on the positives as well. We have to focus on the beauty. We have to focus on the strengths. We have to focus on the growth. We have to focus on the process. I think is a really helpful thing to do.
That's really good. I love, and that's also like a reminder for us as the parent or the caretaker or the individual is, hey, I need
Mhm.
to start this with myself.
Absolutely. Yes,
Mhm.
because it is easy to think about the areas in which we are struggling as parents, or struggling as caregivers, or struggling as humans. But we have to take the times and think about all these ways we're doing well as well, because we are. There's so many
Yeah,
things we're doing a great job with.
totally. Love that. My young adult has a different I love this. My young adult has a different definition of self-care. I guess it's not more of a question, it's more of a comment. We agree and can relate. Yes, I'm currently in a different state taking care of a family member. And yeah, self-care looks different to everybody.
Uh-huh.
I obviously from a clinical standpoint I can't speak to that, but For that individual, he needs his wind down time. He's like, I
Hmm.
need time to just be silent. So
Hmm.
definitely self-care can look different.
Well, and I think including that, like needing wind down time, needing time alone, like that's a valid thing. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with needing those things. So that
mm,
has to go on the list of tasks as an important thing to have. And that we don't have unlimited time. And so when we need one thing, something else has to go, and that's okay. It's
mm,
okay for us to need this time. It's okay for us to need quiet. It's okay for us to need space. It's okay for us to need whatever we need.
mm.
But there isn't unlimited time in the day, and we still also have to have sleep. And so what else can we let go of a little bit because these
Love
other things are a
yes.
higher value to us.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, and that's just reality, right? That we
Mhm.
have that's this many hours in a day.
Mhm.
I love that. What okay, so we have somebody that says my kid has very low self-esteem, although he is academically very bright. Would that
Mhm.
have something to do with the values?
I think it can. I mean, it's complicated to tease out, right? And I don't know your child, so I want to be clear that it depends on the individual child. But it can come with values. It can come with the pressure from other humans. If they're feeling a lot of relational rejection, that can be um, that's going to be really impactful on self-esteem. If they're not feeling like they have people who they feel connected with, that'll impact self-esteem as well. So self-esteem, it can come from perfectionism things and feeling like you're not achieving in certain ways, and that can be relationally as well. But it's not always that. So I think it might be helpful to, if you want to share more, happy to talk a little bit more about that. Or if
And she just did mention that
okay,
he does struggle with peers.
yeah, okay, so that's I think going to be really impactful. So the relational piece. Um, I don't know, it's not perfectionism in quite the same way, but I do think the relational piece is super impactful. And so for anyone who is a little bit different in any kind of way, we live in this neuronormative society, which expects everybody to show up in a certain way. And so depending on the school, depending on the structures, depending on all these kinds of things, figuring out ways in which you fit in and figuring out like who are your people is really important to have. And so when you don't have that, finding ways to have that is super important. And so that can be about like finding activities outside of school where they can meet people and feel connected and like make true friends that they don't necessarily see in school. So at least they have something. It can be about like working with the school um to 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 build social supports for everybody, and in an affirming way. I think again, this is not related to perfectionism, but hopefully nobody minds that.
Mhm.
If you're not familiar with the double empathy problem, I think every school should be teaching every child about the double empathy problem from the lens um, of the way brains work. And so the double empathy problem is the concept that at a space, it is the concept that autistic brains and allistic brains work differently, right? Like autistic people show up this way, allistic people show up this way. It is in no way negative. It's in no way problematic. It's just about differences. It's acknowledging differences. Because when autistic folks understand how allistic folks work, it increases empathy. When allistic folks understand how autistic folks work, it increases empathy. And I would go well beyond just autistic and allistic. I would include ADHD. I would include gifted. I would include learning disabilities. I would include dyslexia. I would include all these things about like how we work and that we are different and that everybody shows up differently. And that's okay. Like we just show up differently and we all need different things, but teaching explicitly about these areas is, I think, super important so that people can feel seen and understood. And so it's not like, oh, that kid is weird or oh, that kid is a problem. It's, oh, we all are different. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. That just means we're different. And so we need to know how we work with each other in these
Mm,
different ways.
mhm,
And so
mm.
teaching about different ways brains work, different ways we exist in the world, and different ways we show up, and then how do we work on that, I think is a really important thing to do.
That's great. Oh, thank you. And you have given yes, thank you so much, Allison. Very
Yeah.
helpful. And you've given us all so many resources. So I'll make sure that we send out some of these URLs. I've been looking at them as we go, but even that double empathy,
The
pro-
double empathy problem. Mhm.
that's awesome. Okay. And we have one more question for now, unless anybody else wants to ask any. It says, give me an example of having my child choosing their task or activity.
Okay, so that might be making a list of the things they have to do for the day, and then ranking each of them as to how important it is. So if on their list is that they're going to, and sometimes it's like it doesn't necessarily actually feel that important to them, but it might, if we're thinking about it from a perfectionist lens, and they have music practice, and they have a sports practice, and they have time with friends, and they have a family obligation, then it might be looking at all those things and determining what feels most important to them so that they can determine where they want to put their energy.
Mm,
Now, if the thing that doesn't feel important is the family obligation and that's a non-negotiable, that doesn't get listed as part of those tasks. You
mm,
can have a list of non-negotiables. You can have a list of like sleep is a non-negotiable, this family obligation is a non-negotiable, but that they
mm,
also have to have other time and other ways to choose like what matters to them. Um, and there can be negotiations as to like maybe how the family obligation shows up or things like that, depending on the child and what they need. If it's a list, but I think listing out like what they, all the different things they have to do, and then thinking about how important each of them really are, each of those tasks really are to that child, and where do they really want to put their time because it is limited time, I think is a helpful way to do it. Is
yeah.
that, to whoever asked that question, does that help? If not, put it in the chat that it did not, and I will try to talk more.
Yeah, but that makes sense, though. That makes sense. This has been great.
Okay.
Been wonderful. I think a big thing that stood out to me, Allison, was that it's the modeling piece, but it's also what it means to be human, you specifically
Mhm,
said. What it
mhm,
means to be human. And I think that for me, it's that's such an important reminder of like there, even within this perfectionism or these just incredibly brilliant brains,
mhm,
there are so many different variations of what it means to be a human being. And I
mhm.
appreciate that simplification that you're providing today.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And Eve, thank you so much. And thank you to Tiffany and everyone at Guiding Bright Minds for this opportunity. And thank you to everyone who attended today. My email address is on all the slides. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out if you want to talk further about any of this. Happy to have the conversation. So thank you
Yeah.
all so much.
Love it. And Allison, really quick, so I did put your email address in the chat.
Oh, great.
Actually, what I did, I put your URL in the chat.
Awesome.
What is your email address, though, just so people easily have it?
It's Allison at heartfirsttherapy.com. I would type it if I could figure out how to get to the chat. Maybe I just need to stop sharing the screen. I don't know.
First
Um,
Therapy, I got you. No, I got you. .com.
okay. Yeah.
Allison
Mhm.
at heartfirsttherapy.com.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to all the parents, all the caregivers, the human beings who were able to attend
Mhm.
today. Thank you for attending these. We do these monthly, as you know. And like I said at the start of this, if you do want to have kind of an interaction with this recording, message us in here and
Mhm.
definitely get to know Allison. So thank you so much. Check out guidingbrightminds.com for any additional resources, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Have a great day.